So we'll start by taking things back, as we usually do, to where you grew up. What did your parents do, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia. My dad was an architect, and my mom was an architectural historian. So I grew up getting dragged around to buildings all over Philadelphia by my parents, and didn't really appreciate it until I got grown up, and then realized I liked all the same stuff they did, and was kind of annoyed by the fact that I missed my chance to enjoy it as a kid. I lived in the same house since I was born, and went to the sort of same school all the way through. Played a lot of sports and video games, and was like nerdy but not too nerdy, I guess. And so I was in Philadelphia until I graduated from high school, and then I came to Yale.
Came to Yale. So what made you decide Yale?
I don't know, it just felt comfortable and I liked it, and my older brother had gone here, so it was like vaguely familiar to me. And I don't know if I had any really strong, compelling reasons why I had to go to Yale, but I'm glad that I did.
And you entered into psychology major.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about your experiences in studying psychology.
Sure. Psychology was a really interesting major just because I think there's a lot of good science and also a lot of bad science. There's a lot of stuff that isn't very cut and dry, even if the experiments are designed to look that way. And so I really enjoyed it because the area of psychology I was most interested in is like cognitive and social psychology, and the sort of core thesis there is that small changes can make a really big difference, and people will behave based on changes in incentives in the environment. And I think my work now is also closely related to that. There's a lot of data measurement that's assuming that people act the way they do because of the environment around them and the interaction between that and what's happening in their brain.
So you were here for 4 years. What was it like there? You had, in terms of entrepreneurship and startups and.
As far as I knew, there wasn't much going on. And that doesn't mean that it certainly feels like there's more infrastructure now in terms of a community being built. But then again, I don't know if I was looking for it. So my perspective is probably a little different now. But this current spot was like a hole in the ground for most of the time while I was an undergrad. So it's pretty remarkable to be here with all these people in this amazing building. It's great. And I think that's the Yale School of Management too. It went back there, and there's a lot of interest in entrepreneurship there too. So it definitely feels like there's more going on.
So you're on track for a law program. You were going into the law program.
Yeah.
Obviously you didn't do that. You kind of got sidetracked. Why is that?
I think my job right before I applied to law school was just put enough doubt in my mind that I changed course at the last second. I worked at the district attorney's office in Manhattan for a few years doing sort of data-driven consulting. They had, in the late 70s, invested in this mainframe system that tracks every single court appearance in every courtroom in Manhattan. And New York can do this basically because they have a lot of extra money from civil settlements with banks that are based in Manhattan. So they can do some things that the average local prosecutor's office can't really invest in. So they invested in this technology, and over the years had built this huge amount of infrastructure to track data associated with court cases. And when I got there, a coworker and I were given access to all of these systems, which had previously been used to sort of serve applications for an attorney. You show up in the morning and you open Internet Explorer, and it tells you, go to this courtroom at this time. Here's a link to the information about the case. But there was all this data in there, and you could look at every single court appearance for like 40 years and figure out what would the implications be if you offered this charge instead of this charge. What would it be for average sentences and the budget and whatever. Even really simple stuff, just counting and dividing and multiplying was much, much easier than it previously had been. And I think they were just realizing how much intelligence was there. So he and I sort of taught ourselves to code to make use of that data.
You didn't do any computer science courses before?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, totally sort of like self-taught. And then I applied to law school, and just kind of at the last second was like, I'm not sure I want to do this. And tried to find a place where I could work and get technical chops without being an engineer. So that's how I ended up in Squarespace.
Okay. Was that, at the time you were deciding on your law degree, was that at the same time as the body part thief?
No, I did that right before the Manhattan DA's office. I just worked for a summer in Philadelphia. That was actually another one that was like weirdly data driven because basically what was happening was there was this incredibly sort of evil dude from Philadelphia who'd been a dentist and lost his license and then figured out that there's a market for human tissue. So he went to funeral homes all over Philadelphia and paid the funeral home directors for access to the bodies and then took ligaments and stuff and falsified all the medical records and sold them to people who later got them for ACL replacements and whatever. And they got sick. It was like really morbid. And so it took a long time to figure out what was happening because they were getting sick all over the country. And the connection was that they were coming through this sort of fictitious company in Philadelphia. So I just was there for the summer and helped. They had just insane amounts of documents with all these death certificates and stuff that had been falsified. It was really wild.
Wow. Okay, so you finished at the DA's, and why Squarespace? What drew you to that?
This is gonna sound weird. It was the only job I applied to because I sort of had a change of heart at the last second, and so I needed to act fast. And so I applied and just like, they ran a really competent hiring process, which is like a weird differentiator, but like before I'd even thought of applying to another company, the next day I got an email from them, and the next day I was in to interview, and the next week I was offered a job, so it was so fast that I was just excited to have a job. And I didn't even have the chance to consider other opportunities, honestly, which was very lucky.
Okay, yeah, that is lucky. So let's talk about Squarespace then. What is it? What is Squarespace, for those who don't know?
Yeah, Squarespace is a platform for building your own website. Historically, that's been a very difficult thing to do. The company was founded in 2004, and our CEO is the founder of the company. It's like a classic dorm room story, and he wanted to build his own website, was sick of how difficult it was, and started to build software tools to make that easier, and then realized he could sell that to other people, and has been doing it ever since. That's like his only ever full-time job, which is wild. And since then, we've gotten over 1 million paying customers, and it's a much, much more diverse place than it was before. There's merchants selling millions of dollars a year through online stores. There's people with really robust portfolios. There's web professionals who are running whole creative agencies building sites for other people on a consumer platform that really wasn't originally intended for that. And we've really diversified out into sort of creative tools to help you build a beautiful home online. That's the way we talk about it internally. And that may or may not involve websites all the way into the future, but we do feel that it's important for you to have sort of an ownable presence online that's truly yours.
Truly yours. Okay, let's talk about some numbers.
Sure.
How many websites have people created?
Millions, yeah.
Employees, how many employees?
We're a little over 500. There's 300 in New York and 100 in Portland and 100 in Dublin.
Okay. And how much venture capital have you guys raised?
78.5 million.
Amazing.
Although it's funny, I feel like we've raised it only because we really felt like we had a good use for it, and we tend to be, we're not going to raise money unless we need it. I think there's other companies that just raise huge sums of money these days because it's cheap, and I think there's a good case to be made for that too. But that's sort of not our approach. So we've raised $78.5 million because we had a good way to spend it. But if we didn't have plans to spend it, we definitely wouldn't raise it. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, you have to be held accountable for that money as soon as you raise it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
You can run the way you want unless, if you don't take absorb crazy amounts.
Mm-hmm.
So run us through an average day in the office.
Sure. Let's see. Today I got in the morning and met with our data science team. They're building sort of classification algorithms. So we've got really, really diverse customer base, and we want to understand what every website is about. And it's not as easy as asking people what their website is about. So they're writing algorithms that essentially read the content of these sites and classifies them based on the content. And that helps us set priorities and decide what areas of the business are growing, how we're going to market, things like that. After that, I went to our media and acquisition meetings. We've got a team that's buying all of our media in-house for marketing. And we talk through upcoming campaigns and data on what's working and what's not working, things like that. Followed by a meeting with a couple people on our internationalization strategy. So the company's primarily in the US, but we have a big non-US presence as well. And so we're really putting a focused effort on growing that. So there's sort of internal storytelling around that to make people understand what's happening when. Had lunch with a teammate of mine to talk through some management issues that he's having running his team. And did a one-on-one with an employee who reports to me just to talk about what's going on with his work and his life and that kind of stuff. And then I got on a train and come up here. So lots of talking.
That's really fun. So I guess this might seem like a simple question, but why Squarespace? You know, people have Facebook profiles now. Businesses have Facebook profiles. You know, why do people need their own space on the internet?
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about this on a little earlier because I went to get a cup of coffee on the way from the train station, and in front of me at Starbucks, the woman at the register was talking to the Starbucks employee who was ringing up her order, and she was saying, "Oh, you know, my church doesn't have a website. Like, isn't that funny? They've only got their Facebook page." And the other one was cracking jokes about how sort of unprofessional that felt for like a serious community. And I think our feeling is sort of a generalization of that, which is that we think that it's really important for people to be able to tell their own story in their own way, and that we try to get as much as we can out of the way and just give them the tools to do that. And there's sort of different layers of that. Like, it's fulfilling for people who get to do that, but we also think it's sort of like such a cliche to say, like, how are you making the world a better place? But we really think that it's an important tool to allow people to compete. And it's really hard to get your ideas listened to and taken seriously, and looking professional is a big part of that. And it's hard to do that at a Facebook page. It's primarily Facebook, and you just happen to be there. Probably have to be there. So we really think it's important for people to be able to craft their own story, sort of outside the boundaries of some other brands.
Okay. So you have some competitors in this space. I mean, Facebook, not really, but there's Wix, there's Shopify, there's WordPress. You know, how does Squarespace see these competitors?
I think a couple of years ago it wasn't really clear. I think now all of them have grown into really big, sophisticated companies. WordPress is still private, but powers a quarter of the internet, and GoDaddy, Wix, Shopify are all public companies with hundreds of millions of dollars a year in revenue. So they're very sophisticated, and they know what they're doing, and they think each of them have started to mature into a particular niche and a particular audience. I think relative to our competitors, there's certain things that we're sort of uncompromising on. We're the most sort of product-forward company. We're very product-oriented, and real emphasis on quality, and that gives us some additional pricing power, and gives us the ability to invest in really forward-thinking stuff technologically. But it's also hard then to sort of stand out, because you've got competitors that offer cheaper products or free products, or those that are easier to use. And, we're sort of comfortable with that reality because we like this sort of premium position in the market. But all of them are very sophisticated now, which is really interesting to watch.
So let's talk about acquiring users and amplifying your reach, which is particular to your expertise.
Yeah.
What are some of the analytical tools you use? Some of the data science you look at to really grow your user base?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a couple of things. One is, like, we have a set of tools that that lots of other companies use, and then we have a bunch of proprietary stuff that we've invested in sort of since the beginning. When I first started, there was a very small engineering team, and 3 of them were just working on internal data engineering. And now our internal data engineering team is almost, I think it's 10 people. And several others just working on internal tooling to be used by employees. So like a double-digit percentage of our engineering team is working just on internal tools for employees. And that's based on just a long-term bet that we're going to be able to own that data and solve problems better than any off-the-shelf tool could do. It's also a huge luxury to be able to do that. And for lots of things, they're just incredible free tools. We still use Google Analytics, which is free. We use Mixpanel for event analytics, which is not free, but relatively affordable. and a lot of sort of software as a service solutions that we use have an analytical component to things like Zendesk, which we use for customer support. But primarily we're looking at sort of like internal proprietary data that we track and store on our side. And for user acquisition, for instance, we have our own models for customer lifetime value and marketing acquisition costs and things like that.
That's something you put together yourself, right?
Yeah. So we've been refining those and tearing things down and building them back up on sort of models of customer value and likelihood to buy the product and what marketing is attributable to their acquisition and things like that since I've been there. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the growth hacks or experiments that you guys conduct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that it seems like growth hacking is a term that's like sort of starting to come out of favor again, and I don't know why that is. For us, a lot of our work starts from sort of first principles, and we test within relatively narrow bands. So one of the core like company values is to optimize towards ideals. So there's maybe apocryphal story about Google testing, I forget however many shades of blue on the links to see which links get clicked the most, what was the optimal shade of blue, which is really sort of like alien to us. We're very product and design driven, and most of our testing is basically make sure that you're not going to hurt the business, but if you think it's the right thing to do and you can prove that it's not going to hurt the business, it probably is the right thing to do in the long term. And so we do a lot of testing to say, we've invested a lot in launching this new product, let's get it out there just so we can understand how it works. And as long as it's not a disaster, we're going to keep going because we generally have a pretty strong belief in the instincts of the people building products. Okay. But we also test the heck out of Squarespace.com with copy and sign-up flows and things like that. You can definitely get a huge amount of value out of that. It's just within sort of like pretty narrow boundaries.
If you put something up and it doesn't go well, you retract? Facebook does that 2 steps forward, 1 step back type thing.
Yeah, that's not our style, I don't think. Like they're the move fast and break things guys, and we're not. We tend to be quite deliberate and I think also very opinionated. Like Facebook's very opinionated in its own way, but our product tends to be quite opinionated, and we think there are certain things that even if they don't perform well in the short term are probably good investments over the long term, and probably if we can determine that they're better for customers, then we'll continue to do it even if the numbers suffer for a little while. But I was just reading a thing last week from Jeff Bezos in his letter to shareholders of Amazon stock, and he was talking about the difference between sort of the types of decisions where you're walking through a door that you can walk back through, and the types of decisions where you're walking through a door that's going to shut behind you and you can't go back. And his point was that companies have a hard time telling the difference between the two, and so they act very deliberately on decisions where you shouldn't be deliberate. You should just go through and see what you see, and if you don't like it, just turn around and go back through the door. But if you think of every decision that way, you're going to make some really grievous mistakes that you can't undo. So being able to differentiate between something that's undoable and something that isn't is really important, and we try to do a good job of drawing lines between those so we can move really fast in the places where it's appropriate and really be sure we're doing the right thing in the places where you can't turn around and do it.
Okay. So you're very methodical and thought.
Yeah.
What about pay-per-click advertising? Do you guys do that?
Sure, we do. Most of the stuff that we're paying for clicks is just through Google AdWords. So people searching for keywords that suggest that they're interested in building a website or buying a domain name or selling online. And all of our sophisticated competitors are there as well. I think generally I'm like a long-term skeptic of pay-per-click advertising, and the only reason for that is that it's like competitive by design. Everybody is bidding to appear on these search results, and if you're in a place where there's a lot of people searching, there will be lots of people who think it's worth figuring out how much to pay for that click. And so it's super, super efficient. So if our customer and all of our competitors' customers are worth roughly the same on average, we'll all be willing to spend right up to that on a click. And so there's not a lot of money to be made there because it's hyper competitive and very efficient. And so we invest there in places where we can find inefficiencies. But in many places, the market is so mature that you can't make a ton of money bidding on clicks because everybody knows what the clicks are worth. They're all companies who've been around for years and have collected tons of historical data and can guess how likely someone is to buy a website if they search By website. Yeah.
Okay. So, you do pay-per-clicks, but let's talk about some of the other advertising channels, media that you use. One of those is podcasts, as Nicole mentioned before.
Yeah.
This American Life. The others are Super Bowl, the Golden Globes, the Grammys. It's $5 million to take out a 30-second clip on the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
How do you justify that, and talk about the strategy behind the reasoning why?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the flip side, it's an extreme comparison to pay-per-click advertising.
Yeah.
But I think our thinking about it is somewhat consistent with my earlier answer, which is one of the things that is sort of defensible and less competitive is a recognizable brand. You're gonna have a really hard time competing against Coca-Cola, given the investment they've made in how each of us feels about Coca-Cola. It costs them billions of dollars to get that, but that's a very defensible position. It's really hard to compete with that if you're an upstart soda maker. And in our space, which is so competitive, a brand is one of the few things that you can establish to protect yourself from competitive forces. And the Super Bowl and the Grammys and the Oscars are all a part of that. And so too is podcasting. Podcast is significantly less competitive than paid search. And part of that is because the people who've been buying podcasts for us are friends with all of the podcast hosts. We were there before it was the size it is now. And if they have an opportunity come up, they call us directly. And people who are trying to advertise in the podcast world now go through a marketing agency that has a relationship with a company that oversees multiple podcasts, and they're never gonna get that call. So it's significantly less competitive than search, where if you wanted to bid on keywords tomorrow, you could, and you would be our competitor. In the podcast world, that's not true. If you wanted to advertise on the podcasts we're on, you won't be able to. Or if you do, you'll have to pay a significantly higher price. So we're looking for those places where it's less competitive, where our competitors can't go. And our brand positioning is one of those things. Our competitors cannot go to that brand positioning. It's a limitation in some ways to be positioned as a premium player or as unusually creative or something like that. And it's obviously expensive. But if you can do that, our competitors are going to feel constrained and not able to go to that place. Wix has a tagline of "it's easy and free." They can't charge for their product, but we can charge for our product explicitly because of that positioning. So in that sense, we're sort of not competing with each other as directly, and I think they don't mind that, we don't mind it either. So as the companies have matured, they've sort of gone to these slightly less competitive niches around particular customers and particular messaging that allows these companies to scale without having to just battle to the death with their competitors. Yeah.
Cool. So Squarespace recently brought out some new products. One of those is the ability to purchase domains, kind of like what you can do on GoDaddy.
Yeah.
Why do you bring these new lines out? What does it take to convince a company to decide?
Yeah, I think for us, it's like, is it consistent with the mission of the company? If we're here to help people build a beautiful home online, then many people start by buying a domain, and we think we can do it better than the sort of antiquated competitors. So we feel this is consistent. It helps our customers do the thing that they've essentially hired us to do. So that's the first step. And the second is, can we do it better than anybody else? And in this case, we really thought we could, because the companies that sell domains tend to be companies that came around in the 90s when that was first a difficult thing to do. And so a lot of the technology that's built on is really antiquated, and we thought it could be innovated against and provide a much better experience for customers. So that was sort of the second thing, like, do our customers need it? Is it consistent with the mission, and can we do it better? And then it has to work in terms of the business economics too, but we felt pretty confident that that would work.
Competitors like GoDaddy can be pretty sneaky. When you buy a domain, they'll add on all this other stuff. I guess, Squarespace is pretty transparent with this sort of thing.
Yeah, the first year you're going to pay more for a Squarespace domain than a GoDaddy domain, because you can get one for 99 cents, but there's a big fat asterisk next to the 99 cents. So we don't have any of that, and that's part of the reason why we really wanted to do this, is that it's a space full of asterisks, and we felt that we can position ourselves as just like transparent, fair, clean, simple, completely above board. And partly we have the luxury of doing that because we built a brand that can be trusted. So that's a position that we can go to and people will pay slightly more because they know that they're not getting cheated.
Trust. What about the future of Squarespace? Any new product offerings you've got coming?
Yeah, there's definitely stuff in the works. And I think you can probably guess what some of it would be because it's sort of consistent with this idea of an online home. We've got a lot of people operating really serious businesses on the platform, selling and communicating with customers. And so we're trying to add a lot of depth really to help them expand their businesses and succeed. And so there's just a lot of depth that we're pursuing.
You know, you're the vice president, you lead a group, you know, of people, 12 people plus. What do you think it takes to be a good leader?
I don't know that I am a good leader. I try to be. I think it's a really hard question.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's the hardest to win and the hardest to win back, especially, is just sort of the trust of the people on your team. I think you can win that a lot of different ways, and so I have my own particular style to do that. I'm very transparent with people, and I give very direct feedback, and I make sure that they know that I trust them, and also that I want them to grow and succeed. And I think that's sort of the first thing. As we've scaled the team up, the second is probably building the structure to allow people to make decisions on their own. Like if someone has to come to talk to me to decide whether to do thing A or thing B, then it just doesn't scale. And so having clearly articulated goals and building software tools that other people can reuse, sort of having clear company values and team values and things like that, really give people the tools to make decisions for themselves. And I think that's really crucial when you've got, you know, in our case now it's like over 500 people. Many of them are making independent decisions every hour, and so you just need to make sure that you can maintain alignment. And the only way to do that is to communicate what's important to us.
Okay. All right, we're going to open up to Q&A. If anyone has any questions for Andrew, just raise your hand. We've got a speaker, microphone. Anyone? Yes.
How do you get funding for your startup? How do you get funded?
Sorry?
How do you get funded?
How do you get funding?
How did we get funding?
Yes.
We went through sort of the traditional venture capital route. Anthony, the founder and CEO, got some money from his parents to buy a server when he was in college. So that was the first step. And then he was the only employee of the company for, I don't know exactly, but like 3 or 4 years. So he had to buy this server, and then after that it was like cash flow positive from the very beginning, because all you needed was electricity to keep it on and the willingness to get up in the middle of the night if the server crashed. And he's a pretty tough guy, so he worked at that by himself for a long time before he even hired anybody. So it's very, very sort of bootstrapped. And then by the time that was in 2003, 2004, 2008, there were enough customers to go and raise venture capital, and the company was growing. And so he went and raised venture capital from Excel, which is a Silicon Valley-based venture capital firm, and Index, which is based in Europe. And since then, we've raised one more round of funding about 2 years ago exactly.
So you already had a lot of traction, you already had a lot of users, you already had something to go off to get funding.
Yeah, and as a paid product, we're cash flow positive, so
yeah.
we are raising, in both cases, raising money not to keep the lights on, but to accelerate the growth of the business. But the unit economics of our business are very, very positive, so thankfully we're not, you know, selling a buck for 99 cents, which I think a lot of companies have been doing recently, it seems like. In our case, the margins are really good, and we have a sustainable business, and if we didn't want to raise any money, we wouldn't have to.
Okay. Yes.
Not Yale.
So he's got a mic.
So I have like a 2-part question.
Sure.
First, you said you're in Portland, Dublin, and New York, and the server thing just made me think of this. Where are your servers now? Because obviously if you have all these new clients, you must have a lot more servers. And then the second question I have is, the more on the Dublin thing, if you do have like international servers, what is your clientele like internationally? Or are you still more on the domestic base?
We have data centers in a couple cities in the United States, and we'll be expanding into other data centers around the world. And most of the customer base is in the US, but a very significant chunk is overseas, most of them in English-speaking countries, because we only offer the product in English right now, though that's going to change soon. We've got, our biggest non-US customer bases are in the places sort of you would expect, the UK and Australia and Canada. But almost every single country on earth has somebody who's a Squarespace customer at this point, which is pretty fun.
Yes.
What was your marketing strategy that would be like your defining pivotal point for the company where you really felt things turn to kind of really get that growing success?
Yeah, that's a great question. We had, I think, a couple, because there have been sort of several inflection points. I suppose the first was starting advertising at all, although I wasn't around for that, but Anthony was buying paid search ads, as early as 2004, and I think that's an essential part of growing a company that no one had heard of. In 2013, we really started some bigger brand advertising, things like podcast, or beyond podcasting and search, like online radio, and then eventually television, and that culminated in the Super Bowl. So I think that sort of 12-month stretch where we went from just doing really efficient marketing, like podcasting and paid search, to online radio, television, and Super Bowl was like a just period of extreme acceleration for us. And then I think since then, the change has really been towards internationalizing our marketing, and so we're starting to do a little bit of that now. And that's another place where you're just hitting an entirely new audience. So each of those three really was seeking a new audience. People who never heard of us but were searching for websites. People who weren't listening to podcasts or searching for websites but could interact with brand advertising when we did online radio and television. And now it's international audiences who haven't seen a lot of Squarespace marketing.